Welcome back to another step-by-step tutorial. Today we're doing watercolor koi fish. Let's do it. For today's lesson, you're going to need a sheet of watercolor paper, a pencil, a bug. You're going to need a watercolor palette, a cup of water, a flat brush, and a small, thin, round brush. Let's do it. I just started to pre-draw my drawing just so it's easier for me to direct you guys. First thing we're going to do is we're going to add 2 dots in the middle bottom of our paper. And then you're going to go about halfway and put a dot here. We're going to connect that dot with our bottom dot with a curve, kind of like the letter C. You're going to stop around right here and then switch directions and connect down. Then to do the other side, we're going to add a dot there, connect them with a straight line. We're going to go straight down and then curve inward. So that line is kind of straight like a number 1. And then we're going to curve out like a backwards letter C. Connected down to our dot at the bottom of our paper. We're going to add a dot here and one right here. This is going to be the beginning of our fin. Bottom line is going to have a straight line. Top dot is going to become a straight line. And then we're going to connect those with a letter J. Going to go to the other side, add a dot here. And one about right there. Same thing, straight line out. And then a backwards J and straight line down. These are going to be our 2 main fins on our koi fish. Now we're going to do the baby ones. We're going to add 2 dots about right here. And add a dot to just kind of create a triangle. And then we're going to create a triangle with curved edges. The smaller the better. Same thing on the other side. 2 dots. A third for the point. And then connect all 3 dots. Now we're going to go to our second fish. You're going to measure from the top, add a dot right in the middle, about right there. And then you're going to use the dot on the first fish, go across to the right and add a dot, well, 2 dots right there. Now let's start drawing. We're going to go down and then curve. Think of like a really elongated letter S. So it's going to curve to the left and then curve to the right at the bottom, connecting the top dot and the bottom dot. This one's going to be a really big letter C. So we have to go out first. Once we get to about right here, we can add a dot just for measuring purposes. Then we're going to go ahead and create our backwards letter C. It's okay to sketch these out. These are hard lines. And then smooth it all out. You can see our fish is already starting to form. Add a dot about right here. And right here is just going to be the beginning and ending of our fin. Straight line down. Straight line down. and connect with a curve or a smiley face. We're going to add a dot about right here. Hello, bug. A dot about right there. We're going to curve down and then back up to connect these. If I'm going too fast, please feel free to rewind or pause if you need to. We're going to go ahead and add a dot down here and add a straight line coming out of that dot. Add a dot here. We're going to continue with a C curve, and then we're going opposite direction to connect that bottom dot to our C curve. Next, we're going to add a dot right there, and we are connecting to the other side of our fish with a small curved line, not too much. Then we're going to add a dot about right here to split the tail, and we're creating like a fork. So this one's going to go to the left side, and the other one's going to open up to the right side. And that's it for the tail. Now we're going to add the spine of our fish. It's basically a line that goes right in the center of our fish in the same curve as the outside part of our fish. And this one's going to follow the same line as the left hand side of our fish. So it's going to curve to the left and back to the right. Now let's go ahead and add the eyes. I'm going to do a circle here, a circle on the other side, circle here, and a circle on the left hand side. Next, we are going to add the fin. I'm not quite sure what that's called. I'm having a brain fart, but we're going to add a separate line that follows the same curve on both kois. And now we're going to do, this koi is going to be like spotted. So this next part, you don't have to do it exactly like mine. They're just organic shapes. And by organic, I mean they don't really follow any particular shape. They're just kind of like, I call them cow spots. Some koi fishes have these spots, and that's what I'm trying to emulate here. All we have left on this one are the little fins in the back, so we're going to add 2 dots about right here and create our curved triangle shape. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now we're done with the fish. We're going to go ahead and start with the background. We're going to add a dot here and a dot here on this right side corner and create a semicircle. These are going to be our lily pads. So we're going to go ahead and add small triangles, and you can do this wherever you want. You don't have to follow mine, but we're going to go ahead and add a couple of triangles just to break this up to give it more of a plant feel. And then I'm going to erase the parts that I don't need. There's going to be a lily pad in all 4 corners. Let's go ahead, go to the left bottom corner. We're going to do a little semicircle there. Top left corner, going to add a dot there and a dot about halfway down our paper and create a really big semicircle. This drawing is going to use the entire paper, so it's going to have a really nice composition. Let's go ahead and add a triangle here, a long triangle here, The triangles are up to you. You can add as many or as little as you want. Just make them all different. People, I don't know if they know this, but to me, the more inconsistencies you have on your drawings, the more realistic it feels. Let's go ahead and add 2 dots on our lily and create another semicircle with a little triangle in the center. Erase that, and we're done with that one. So that little one is underneath the big one. Then we're going to do our lily in the right corner. Gonna make this one pretty big. It's gonna almost touch the fish and come back around. Let's add some little rips. So I got a really long skinny triangle. Now we're gonna add a dot there and a dot on the side of the paper and do another semicircle. This one is just a pad underneath the top one. Overlaps are good when you're creating busy compositions. If you don't know what an overlap is when one thing is on top of another and it's partially covered. And if you don't know what composition means, it's basically how you arrange an art piece so that it's interesting. You want to try to use the entire page when you're doing a good composition. We're going to add a dot here, top left corner. This one's closer to the center. And we're going to add a curve that touches the pad on that side. And then a curve that touches the pad on this side, creating yet another overlap. And creating some rips. And that's it for our green parts. Oh, these bugs are really attracted to my paper today. So now let's get ready to draw the rocks. The rocks, you can definitely do whatever you want here. I am choosing to make mine more like river rocks, so they're a little more squarey, not so round. And I'm making sure that I'm making them pretty big with a couple of small rocks in between. There is no rhythm to this. As long as they are not touching, you are okay. You can add as many or as little as you want. Just 2 things: they can't touch and they need to fill the entire rest of the paper. So if you choose to do small ones, just know that you'll have to work a little harder. If you choose to do bigger ones, just know that you'll have to work a little less. And so I'm just making sure that some of them are coming from the bottom of my koi fish, meaning I am using the body of the fish to overlap my rocks. That way it really gives it the look of that the fish are swimming above these rocks. So I am going to make most of them coming out from behind my fish, just like I am doing here. And if you haven't gathered already, this perspective is a bird's eye perspective, meaning it's the view from if you were standing in the pond looking straight down and these beautiful fish just happen to be swimming underneath your feet. That's the view that, or the perspective that we are trying to get in this painting. When it comes to the space in between the rocks, play with it. They can get really close. You can leave some more spaced out. You can add small rocks in between. The idea is to make them all different. Again, it's the inconsistencies of life that make it so beautiful and so interesting to look at. So don't overthink these rocks too much. Just let them happen. And that's it for the drawing part. It's time to paint. Let's go. If you're still with me, congratulations, you made it through the drawing part. Let's go ahead and grab our thin round brush With watercolor, we're gonna need our brush to be wet for the entire duration of our painting. We are going to start with our background, which is the stuff in the back. And we'll talk about more about that in a little bit. But we're gonna grab some black. You're gonna scrub quite a bit on your black because we do want it pretty opaque. And you are going to fill the spaces in between your rocks. Be very careful. This is a very slow part of the painting. Why? Because you want to make sure that you are not touching your koi. Watercolor is a little bit forgiving, but obviously when you're using black, there's not much forgiveness there. If we get our koi black, it'll stay white black. If you get a little bit of black on the rocks, it's no big deal, but you definitely don't want to get it on the fish. The easiest way of doing this step would be to outline your rocks and then kind of like fill in the negative space. While we are filling this in, I thought that it would be a good time to talk to you guys about why we're doing this step first, because black is such a dark color. When you're painting, you always want to start from back to front. So right now we're working on what's called the background, which is the furthest away from our focal point, which is our fish. So in real life, we would see our fish and then our pads, our rocks, and then the space underneath our rocks. When you're painting, you want to paint it backwards. That way the things that are supposed to be in the front actually look like they're in the front. So that's why you always want to start from back to front. Another tip while you're painting this is the way you hold your brush. Watercolor is a really delicate medium, so there's no need to press down with your brush at all. Most of the paint will be carried in the lines with the water, so I'm kind of just guiding water in these little cracks here. That's really what I'm doing. If there's an area that gets too light, you can always go ahead and dip your brush in the paint a little more. We are going a little heavier in terms of pigment with this black because I don't want to have to do this twice. So I do want it to be pretty black on the first one. You want to hold your paintbrush to the ceiling. Sometimes what that means is the back of your brush should be pointed to the ceiling. That way you can ensure that you are using just the tip of your brush. There is no need to use the entire body of your brush when you're doing this step. And I'm gonna stop talking and let you guys get to it. Once you're done, we're going to go ahead and switch over to our dark brown, and we're going to start filling in our rocks. I'm going to scrub my brown quite a bit because I do want it to start off opaque. However, we are going to do some watercolor techniques here. You're going to place your pigmented, which means a lot of paint, brushstroke on one side of your rock and then kind of make the other side lighter. What side specifically you can choose, but most of my left sides are going to be the darker part of the rock on my painting. So you're more than welcome to follow me. Let's go ahead and do that again. I'm going to add most of my pigment on the left side of my rock, and then I'm going to paint the remainder of the rock with whatever's left on the paintbrush. I'm going to touch the brown just a little bit and then drag it down. So we do want it to kind of create like a fade, meaning it goes from dark to light. This one I went really light, and then I'm going to leave it like that. Again, inconsistencies are key here. You don't want all the rocks to look the same. So press harder in some rocks, use a little more pigment on others. You choose. I always start with a lot of pigment on my brush, and then I use the rest of it to kind of drag out. Look at how nice that looks. So the left side of your rocks should be darker, and then the right side should get lighter. Again, I'm not pressing down on my brush at all. I'm just letting the water move the pigment around. I'm going to go ahead and leave you to it. If you guys had any concerns, I know this is a longer video. If I didn't explain anything like absolutely correctly, or if you have some questions on anything that I taught you here today, please leave it in the comments and I will try to address it next time. We are going to go now and get a lighter brown, preferably a redder brown, to create this color combination. I am adding the red brown on the right hand side to make my lighter part of my rock a little red. So I'm going to place my red brown on the right hand side and drag it towards the dark part of my rock. So on the opposite side of where you put your dark brown is where you're going to start your light brown. And again, pick and choose how much pigment you want on certain rocks. For this part, you do want to use the body of your brush. You see, the more of the brush you use, the less line work you'll get. So it'll be easier to create some blends. And it'll help push the pigment a little bit more. So as you can see here, I'm going to start on my right hand side and drag it towards my left. It really creates this nice flow between the dark brown and the red brown. Again, always make sure that your brush has a little bit of water on it. If your pigment is coming out too pigmented, meaning it's too dark, watercolor, you can always just lighten that up really quick by adding some water to it. So I really do encourage you to play with the opacity, which means how solid or how transparent a color looks when you're doing your rocks. Choose some to look a little more solid in terms of pigment and let some be a little more airy. So use more water in some and less water in others. Okay, now that we're done with our background, we're going to grab our dark brown and start the shadow casted by our fish onto the rocks. And the technique that you're going to use is you're going to get dark brown, fill your brush up with dark brown, create an outline around your fish, and then take a little bit of water and smudge out the edges of that line. We do not want a lot of water, so much water that we get rid of the brown on our rocks. So when I mean you're going to use water to smudge it, I mean just a little bit. You don't need a lot. So first step is outline your fish with dark brown. Your line should be thicker than a regular outline, so just about as thick as I'm doing it here. And then you're going to take a little bit of water and smudge out the edge. That's going to really help with the three-dimensionality of this painting. So it's really going to push our fish to float on top of those rocks. So again, a nice pigmented line of dark brown around the edges of our fish, and then a little bit of water to blur out the edges. Now we're going to do our second one. Again, outline, and you can go in sections. Don't try to do the whole fish in one shot. And obviously this is sped up. Please feel free to pause the video as much as you need so that you can stay with me. So outline and then smudge. Just a little bit of water. You don't need a lot. Outline, outline, and smudge. How thick should you make your line? I would say about 1/4 of an inch-ish, maybe a little more, but definitely bigger than, your average outline. You want it to read like a shadow, not like you're outlining your fish. Just gonna fix a couple things here. The darker the better. We don't want to use black because it might be too striking, but you're also going to do the same thing with all the lily pads. So we're going to make a thick outline around the edges of our lily pad. And for this one, you're going to go right on top of the lily pads because those are underneath it. Look at that. That already looks three-dimensional. Same thing on this side. We're going to add a little bit of brown right underneath our lily pads. Now we're going to go ahead and switch over to black. I'm going to make this corner a little darker, and then I'm going to use my black to darken up the browns within my lilies, because I do want those to be quite dark. So exact same technique. We're going to do our black outline, and then we're going to smudge it out a little bit with our water. Now we're getting our dark green. We're going to start painting the pads. This technique that we're going to do here is called wet on wet. I'm going to soak my brush in water, and I'm going to lay down a thick layer of wet, basically colored water, and then I'm going to get more pigmented strokes, and I'm going to lay in my darker green around the edges. This is going to create a really nice watercolor effect, more on the organic side, not so smooth. So you want the darker pigment to be on the edges, and it'll automatically blend in when it hits that water from what you originally did there. So there's not a lot of blending necessary here. Again, you want the edges of your pad to be the darker parts, and then the center you want to leave it a little lighter, just a little bit of that green water. I'm going to grab some more pigment here. I'm going to do this edge right here, line that up. You see how I can blend because of my paper is so wet still. You can go ahead and blend without having to dip your brush back into the water. That's good for the first layer. I kind of like it messy. I think it gives it a good contrast between how smooth our rocks are. So, play with it. We're going to again drop a lot of water on that and check this out. You're going to do tiny dots and they're going to expand and explode and you get to like kind of play with the flow of that green in there. Don't blend it too much. I think it looks nice like that. So you're kind of just wiggling your paintbrush over the water and seeing what happens. Yours might look different from mine, and that's okay. I'm going to go back here and just darken a couple of things, add a couple of lines. You can add these lines too if you want. If not, don't worry. It's your painting. Do what you wish. Now I'm going to go back here, the wet on wet technique. So basically straight water first, then scrub my paint and then touch the water and let the paint do what it does. Making sure that my edges are the darker part of my pad. Yeah, you can really see that pooling. That's going to look really nice when it dries. Again, for this whole part, you should be really, really light-handed. You do not need to scrub. If your paper is beating up and kind of like disintegrating, you're scrubbing too hard. Watercolor is all surface, so your brush should never be scrubbing your paper. Think of it more like you're gliding your paint across the paper with the brush, not trying to blend your paint into the paper, if that made sense at all. I don't know if it did. So look at this blend that I was able to get here with just having the water on there first and then adding the color on there after. I'm going to go ahead and add some little lines here. Now I'm going to come in with my heavy pigmented paint. All those white spots that I left are going to be filled in with the dark green. And then I'm going to blur it up a little bit. And then that's it. It creates a nice little blend. Here, there's so much water that it's not even letting me make it darker. So I'm going to come in here, grab some more pigment. Stay just on the edges. Allowing some of that white to show through. Adding some line work. Also, again, don't forget that watercolor is a building medium, meaning you can always go back and make things darker. You cannot go back and make things lighter. So it's better to start lighter and get darker in layers than it is to go too dark too fast. We went dark with the black just because I knew that I wanted it really, really dark. But with these lilies, I'm really just doing a first layer. We're going to go over them again to create more textures and more darkness to them. But try not to go too dark too fast. Then there's really no play in dimension and tonality of your colors. And then it kind of looks flat and boring. So here I'm going back in, adding a couple of darkness, just letting the paint kind of just be, not forcing it to do much. I know that in the end I want my lily pads to be darker than this, but like I said, we must be patient. With watercolor, the word is patience. Patience, patience, patience. I'm going to cover that shadow with green and look at how amazing that dark green looks like now because of the brown underneath. That's how you would blend, that's how you would mix colors in watercolor. You do your darker layers first and then you add your color, your base color on top. I went ahead and I grabbed my dark brown and I added a little dark brown to the shadow areas of my lily pads just to really accentuate the overlap. This one I'm going to go, I forgot to do the green here. But look at how beautiful that looks once that green is on top of the brown. It really pushes out the shadows in those lily pads. Now we're going to go ahead and do our second layer. I'm going to focus on just the darker parts of my pads and just go ahead and add a second layer to those. Try to bring out the contrast in these colors. If you didn't know already, contrast is the balance between your darks and lights. The higher the contrast, the more opposite of the color spectrum the colors tend to be. So black and white are obviously the highest contrast. One of the colors is very, very dark, while the other is literally the lightest color you can think of. So when you're drawing or painting, don't be afraid to push your contrast. That's what really gives something a realistic feel. Coming in, doing our second layer, not really trying to go for the same exact texture I did the first time around. Really just kind of letting the paint go crazy here. I do know I want this one very, very dark because it's so small. Now we're going to grab a little bit of black and go over some of the shadows that we had done earlier just to kind of accentuate the contrast again. We're going to go ahead and grab our yellow now, and we're going to start painting the top koi fish. We're going to start with a little fin. We're going to fill that in yellow, and then you're going to start filling in the edges of your fish first. We're looking for a deep yellow, but not super saturated. We're going to add a little bit of water towards the spine so that it looks lighter at the top and darker towards the edges of our fish. As you see here, I'm dipping the water in my paint and coming and spreading it out. We want this first layer to be pigmented, but not so pigmented that we can't keep layering. So think a little more water than actual color. You're going to go back and forth, making sure that the movement comes from your wrist and we're not pressing down on our brush too hard. We're going to paint everything but the spine and the eyes on our fish. Let's go ahead and do the little fin on the right hand side. The little other fins towards the bottom. And now we're going to paint the spine. Once we've filled it all in, just take a step back and see how it looks. It should have some variations of darker yellows and lighter yellows towards the top of the spine. We're going to grab a little bit of our orange, and we are going to use that orange to fill in the cow spots on our white fish. You're just going to outline it, and then at the top, you're going to do little circles to allow some white spots to show through. I'm going to go ahead and expand this view so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here I'm filling it in, and then I'm doing, I guess, wiggly lines in no particular direction towards the top to allow some light to shine through and create a wet look on our fish. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and grab our orange one more time, and we're going to add it to the right hand side of our yellow fish, just to add a little bit of color combo here. You're going to add a medium sized orange line along the right side edge of your fish, and we're going to use a little bit of water to smooth that out, making sure that we do not get it on our spine. We're going to try to keep our spine as yellow as possible. So we're going to drag this down and blend it in just a little bit, and drag down some of the orange into the center part right before the tail. We're going to add some orange on the left hand side of the spine. And then we're going to do a thinner line on the left hand side, and smudge that out with some water. So your fish should still look predominantly yellow. Let's go ahead and add a orange line on the left hand side of the spine, just to really pop the spine out. And smooth that out with a little bit of water. And now we're adding a little bit of watered down orange to our fins. Okay, so we're going to add some line work to our tail. You're going to hold your paintbrush to the ceiling with a little bit of yellow at first to add a second layer of that yellow. And we're going to go up and down with tiny little strokes. You don't want to put any pressure on your brush. Now we're going to go in with our orange. Same thing, drag a couple of lines up towards the top of our fish, and then drag a couple of lines towards your bottom. Here's a close-up view of that. Sorry, my hand's in the way. But basically, you're not really thinking too much. You're just adding hair stroke lines to create more of a fin feel. Same thing on the other side. Just a couple, not too many. I'm just fixing a couple of things here, adding a couple more strokes and blending it in just a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to our other fish. Now we're going to add a finishing touch on our fish. You're going to take your orange and you're going to make a sharp line on the left-hand side of the spine. And now that our yellow fish is somewhat dry, we're going to go ahead and add a second layer of orange on the right-hand side just to bring out some brightness and vibrance over here. You're going to drag it down. And then we're going to smooth it out with a little bit of water. I decided that it wasn't vibrant enough for me, so I went ahead and added a little bit of red on my paintbrush and brought out a little bit of that red on the right hand side again and dragged it all the way to the midway point of the fish. We are now going to go ahead and grab light gray, and this is going to be for the shadow on the white fish. You're going to make sure that your gray isn't really saturated. We do want it quite a bit watered down. And we're going to go on the left-hand side of our fish. We're going to add a gray line on the left-hand side of the spine, leaving the spine white. We're going to do that all the way down. You're going to add a little bit on the left-hand side of the body, not touching the orange. You're going to do a little bit towards the face as well. Making sure again that your gray is pretty watered down. We don't want it to end up looking like a gray fish. We still want to keep the integrity of the white fish. We're going to add a shadow on the left fin. And then we're going to add a little bit of shadow on the right fin. We're now going to go ahead and do the right hand side of our spine. Just make sure that this one isn't as dark as the one on the left hand side. We are going to use quite a bit of water and blend it out. It's already starting to look awesome. Go ahead and grab a little bit of orange. We're going to do the second layer of the orange to create a little bit of shadow. So you're going to do the bottom parts of your orange. You're just going to add a second layer of the same orange you used the first time to create the appearance of a shadow on the cow spots. This is really going to start pushing the contrast on our fish, which is going to allow it to look more realistic. Now I'm just adding a couple of more gray on our layer, especially the one behind the spine. Just pushing out some darks here. This is a good time to tell you guys that I really appreciate you being here with me today, and to follow me on Instagram and tag me on your finished pieces. Leave comments on what you wish you can see me paint or draw in following videos. My Instagram is at artsyfartsy-rachel, and I would love to see everyone's work, and I post other videos on there, and I'm just, like I said, starting out, so any feedback would be really, really greatly appreciated. Now we're going to go ahead and grab some red, and we're going to add a couple of scales. You can add these wherever you want. I'm going to add these on the right hand side of my spine. Again, trying to be as thin as possible. We don't need to add a lot here. It's just to get the idea of scales. So not a lot, nothing serious. Just go ahead and add a couple of lines. I'm going to rinse my brush and do the same thing with the gray on the right hand side of the white fish. Always paintbrush to the ceiling. Just use the tip of your brush, and you only need to add a little bit here, not a lot. Now we're ready to fill in our eyes. We're going to go ahead and grab some black, and you're going to fill in the eyes and try to leave a little white spot in them just to create a shine. If you don't, that's okay. I just think that it does give it an extra little, pizzazz, if you will. I'm going to do the same thing on my yellow fish. I'm going to leave a tiny little white dot on the eyes. And that's it. Let me see, what else do we have left here? I'm just going to go back into my white fish and add a little defining line on the right hand side of my spine, and add a couple of horizontal strokes in gray on my spine so that it looks more like a fin. That's it. Thank you so much for watching our video. Next week, we are going to be doing a pastel piece, a skeleton hand. I hope you can join us for this creepy one. See you guys next week.